Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Stephanie, and this is the Grow and Grief podcast. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Southern California. I've lived in California my entire life up until 2018 when my husband got a job here in Illinois. And we packed up our family and moved nearly 2,000 miles across the country. I am married to the love of my life and my best friend. We've been married for 15 years. Fun fact, we met on eHarmony. I have 3 kids. My oldest is Steven. He is 19. My middle is Nathan, and he is 14. And Abigail is my little, and she is 4. I have 2 bonus kids and 1 bonus grandson. I am a registered nurse. I graduated nursing school in 2017. And just before graduation, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And I figured I would just wait until I had her to look for a job. And after 4 very long years of searching for a job, I landed a job in oncology. I work at a very small clinic as an oncology nurse. I swore up and down I would be a labor and delivery nurse because that is honestly like my heart. I love babies. I love all things having babies. And God quickly showed me that he had a different path for me. And to be honest, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love what I do. I love the patients that I have. I love the people that I get to work with. It's a very small, like contemporary medicine type clinic, and I absolutely love it. I run a cafe at our church. I'm the cafe leader, and I have just an incredible, incredible team of people that I get to work with on Sundays. And so I'm super, super blessed. And if you haven't been able to tell by now, faith is a huge part of everything that I do. My faith in God is so huge to me. And really, it is the cornerstone of everything that I do. Even our move out here, I knew that God was in it. And the same thing with nursing school. And yeah, and so that's me. But I'm also a homeschooling mom as well. I homeschool my middle and will be homeschooling my little once she starts. But under all of that, I am a girl who lost her mom. And that's kind of why I'm starting this podcast. I had posted a reel of Steven, my oldest, and Abigail after he returned from visiting his dad. And the reel honestly went viral. It was just they're reuniting, and it was the most precious thing. And I think it's sitting at 26 million views right now. And my following went from 1,400 to 49,000. And I am a huge believer that there is purpose behind everything. And so I knew that there's a reason why all of this has happened. And one of the things that kept coming up was I had so many people commenting how they wish they could hug their fill in the blank just one more time. And I was just like, these are the people that I need to help. And I just felt such a pull to help these people. And I honestly, if I'm being completely transparent, I did not want to do this. I honestly fought it because my social media has always been a place of encouragement and just light and not heaviness. And I didn't want to change my social media to a place of discussing grief, because grief is very heavy and it can be very depressing if you're not, I guess, dealing with it in a healthy way. It can be very, very depressing and very, very heavy and just very, very dark. And so I was just like, God, like, I don't want to do this. This is not This is not what my Instagram has ever been. And so I asked a friend of mine if she could, pray for me and just have God just show me what it is that he wants me to do, because I did want to steward this well and do right by it. So I was just like, just pray that God will make it super obvious, that there will be no denying what it is that I'm supposed to do with all of this. And that evening I received a message from this gal. She said, "Thank you so much for posting this video." She said that she lost her brother a year ago. It would have been here in October when I received the messages in September. She said a year ago next month. She was like, "Today's my birthday. Last week was his birthday." She's like, "I just put myself together enough to get on social media." She's like, "Your video was the first video I saw. So thank you so much for posting it." And I knew that this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help people navigate grief, because I get it. I get grief. It's funny. I had talked with a patient yesterday, and she had asked me about my faith. And so I was talking to her a little bit about it. And she's like, "So you're a nurse?" She's like, "You homeschool? You lead the cafe?" She was like, "Is there anything else that you do?" And I said, "Actually, I'm starting a podcast." And she was like, "Oh my gosh." So she had asked me what it was going to be about. And I told her it was going to be about grief. And she asked me, she's like, "What do you know about grief?" Because if you know me, you know that I'm very positive. I'm very encouraging. I've been through a lot, but I don't let it weigh me down. And so if you just meet me, you wouldn't know unless we had a conversation and I told you about what I've gone through. And she was just like, "What do you know about grief?" And so I told her how I lost my mom when I was 14. And so this is kind of how I tie in what I know and what I've experienced into this podcast. I lost my mom when I was 14 years old. She was killed in a freak car accident. She was driving across the 10 freeway, driving eastbound, when a big rig going the opposite direction lost its rear two tires and hit one of the tires, hit the center divider, bounced up 30 feet, and came down on her vehicle. She went from the fast lane to the shoulder, and it was as if she parked her car. She was killed instantly. It was at 5 o'clock, so rush hour traffic. By all logical standards, there's no way that no other vehicle should have, there should have been another vehicle involved in the accident besides the big rig and my mom's car. But those were the only two cars involved in the accident. No other cars were hit. Nobody else was impacted from her going from the shoulder, or from the fast lane to the shoulder. One of the off-duty officers that she worked with was a couple cars behind her and witnessed the entire thing. And he went to her and had said that she had died with a smile on her face. So I guess to some degree that's a consolation, knowing that she was happy, but it didn't make it any easier for me. I remember actually hearing about her car accident on the radio. I had no idea it was her. I was cleaning my room. I was listening to Kiss FM, and the traffic report came on, and they were talking about a fatality that had occurred on the 10 freeway going eastbound. And I just remember stopping and thinking, man, I feel really bad for that person's family. And that's not something that I would typically, deep down, I would think that, but I wouldn't stop and really think about it and really just be like, man, I feel really bad for that person's family. And I had no idea that it was my mom. My dad received a phone call from my uncle that night. So this was Friday night. And I remember I was already laying in bed, and I remember him asking, "Is she okay?" At the time, my then stepmom, her mom was battling cancer, so I kind of just assumed it had to do with her. And I remember my dad saying, "Okay, we'll be out there tomorrow." So I just assumed it had something to do with her and didn't think much of it. At the time, I had been getting in trouble for eavesdropping, so it wasn't like I can be like, "What happened? What's going on?" So I just kind of left it alone. And then the next morning, my dad told me that my mom was in a car accident, and I had asked like if she was okay, and he said yes, because that's what he was told. And I remember driving out to my grandma's house thinking of all the ways in which I was going to help my mom and, help her in her healing. I did not expect to get to my grandma's house and to be stopped in the doorway with my grandma just saying, "She's gone." I remember falling to the floor and just screaming no. Like, I could not believe that she was gone. I understand why she wanted to tell me. It was more of a personal thing for her than it was for what was best for me, which was really hard. And she ended up developing Alzheimer's, so my issues with my grandma never really got to be resolved. So one thing that I've learned is that, one, we all deal with grief differently, and it may be wrong, it may be right, but we just do the best that we can when we're dealing with grief. There is a lot that happened when my mom passed away that was wrong, but I know a lot of it was just trying to please my grandma, and she had a lot of personal issues with my dad in particular, and because of that, in a lot of ways, I was, what is the best way to put this? I guess in a way I was kind of swept under the rug, like, oh, it's fine, just whatever. It was her issues with my dad were more important than what was best for me. And that's just something that I've got to deal with. I've got to accept, and I got to forgive her for on my own, because she's no longer with us. And even if she was, she developed Alzheimer's. So it wasn't like I could have a rational conversation with her and talk to her about how she hurt me and going and resolve this. So this is just one of those things where I just have to resolve it on my own, on my own end, and move forward. So I guess in a way, that's kind of why I'm starting this podcast, is I want to help other people navigate grief. Because grief is heavy. Grief is hard. And if you're like me, I really struggle to take input on how I should grieve from somebody that hasn't actually walked through it. For example, after my mom passed away, I did go to counseling, but I really just sat there and didn't really want to talk because, well, you can read all the steps in a textbook on how to navigate grief and how to deal with it. Unless you've actually walked through it, for me, it doesn't really matter because you haven't actually walked it out yourself. And that was one thing that I struggled with the counselors that I spoke with, was because they hadn't actually dealt with what I was going through. So they weren't, in my opinion, they were not an expert on what I was going through because they had not navigated it. And while I'm coming from, and this is a total, I guess, personal perspective type podcast. It's not a professional. I'm not a professional therapist. I am a nurse, but I'm not a professional. And so this isn't coming from a professional perspective. This is coming from a personal perspective and what I've walked through and what I've navigated and how I have dealt with things. And that's kind of why I want to have this be almost like a reciprocal type podcast. I want to hear from the viewers and the listeners, and I want to hear what you want to hear about. I have set up an email, so you can email me at growingrief@gmail.com. But I also want to bring other people onto this podcast that have dealt with marriages falling apart, losing friendships, a brother, a sister, a friend, a father, somebody that's lost a mother or had a diagnosis that they didn't see coming. There's so many areas in which we deal with grief and with loss that I feel that it's so important to kind of cover a variety of avenues of loss and grief. Because I know losing my mom. That's what I know. But I don't know losing a brother or losing a sister. And so I want to hear from other people that have dealt with other types of losses, because it's different. And there's just so much value in the experiences that we all have and each individual experience. So that's the kind of podcast that I'm hoping and praying this kind of develops into, is one that while what I experienced may not be beneficial to you, what somebody else experienced may be beneficial for you. And I want, even if it's just one takeaway from somebody else or from me or whoever, that helps you start to navigate your own grief journey and take one step towards healing, then it's all worth it for me. This is all worth it for me. So that is my hope. That is my prayer. That's what I'm praying that's what I'm praying comes out of this podcast. Ultimately, is that you would find some kind of hope and healing through this, and that you would just take, even if it's just baby steps towards, being healed, because there's so much freedom in healing. And I feel like it's so important to take those steps and to walk in that freedom. So I'm just going to wrap this up now. And I just want to say that, remember, goodbyes are not guaranteed. And I hope that this podcast can water your life so you can grow in grief today. Have a good day.